Hello and welcome to Movement Building from Home Week 2. I'm Chad from Mozilla, one of your co-hosts, joined by Abby as well. And we're convening these calls in response to the COVID-19 crisis because we want to bring people together for peer-to-peer learning about sustaining our activism and our movement building work in these difficult and uncertain times. Last week's call focused on running online meetings. Today we'll talk about practicing online community care. Next week, we'll talk about balancing that out with personal ecology or self-care. And then we'll close the series the week after that, talking about online community management. If you'd like to learn more, you can check out our blog post announcing the series. You can also reach out to us directly. We're so pleased to have you here. And these notes are yours. So please help us by taking notes today on things that kind of stand out to you, sharing your questions in the document, plus wanting things that seem powerful to you, and just interacting as much as you feel comfortable. We really appreciate you being here and sharing your ideas with us. And with all that being said, I'll throw things over to Abby for a reminder of our community participation guidelines.
Thanks, Chad. And we shorthand call it CPG, so you see that somewhere. It means our community participation guidelines. But a quick reminder to please be respectful, honest, inclusive, accommodating, appreciative, and open to learning from everyone else. Do not attack, demean, disrupt, harass, or threaten others or encourage such behavior. So you can read our full community participation guidelines linked there in the doc. I'm highlighting it now. If anything does come up, please report them to either Chad or myself. Our emails are in the doc. It's probably the best and safest way to reach out to us. Yeah. Chad, goals of the call.
Thank you. Yeah, so we are here on this call as we are on the other calls to check in with one another as community members, community managers, and to hold space to really listen to each other, our questions and our ideas about how to keep things going. We're here to share practical and effective ways this week about showing care in online communities. And we're here to have some discussions that will help us kind of consider and think about practicing care as a dimension of accessibility and equity, justice, inclusion, and welcomeness in the communities in which we participate and those that we serve. To get us started there, we'd like to hear a little bit about your communities and your experiences right now, especially around care. And Abby has some prompts for us to do just that.
Yeah. So if you remember silent documenting from last week, we'll be doing that again today. We've put a couple of definitions of community care up at the top for you to look at if you're wondering what we mean by community care. I'll highlight this one from Heather Dockeray. Community care is basically any care provided by a single individual to benefit other people in their lives. This can take the form of protests, for which community care is best known, but also simple interpersonal acts of compassion. So with that in mind, the two prompts are, how are you showing care to your community online? What's worked well when doing that? And then the second is, what challenges have you faced for, in caring for your community during this time? So we'll take about 5 minutes just to go through those questions and hear from you. And if you don't feel like writing or you don't have access to the doc, feel free to verbalize and one of us will take notes. And yeah, a reminder to +1 things that really resonate with you. I know I'm seeing a lot of stuff that I'm definitely also feeling. All right. Yes, seeing lots of great shares here. Thanks, Brenda, for talking about the mailing list and distributing that. I just signed up. Very excited. A lot of people talking about check-ins, both through a survey or at the beginning of calls. That's great. Sharon talks about co-facilitating, free workshops around mental health. Nice. Yeah, and please share any links that we can share with the rest of our community. I think those are really valuable resources. Thanks for sharing that, Sharon. Christina, we've been hosting and organizationally hosting network calls, put together a large range of things for National Poetry Month. Oh, nice. Yeah, again, share some links. And this one has a +1, sending periodic messages via our channels for lighter topics of conversation, including language and communication that stresses that things are weird right now, and we can all take a little longer to respond if needed. Yeah, and I think just being really gracious around people's participation if they have to drop off, it's really important. Thanks for that, Steve. Does anyone want to verbalize something here? And thanks for adding the National Poetry Month link. Sorry, go ahead. Was that Marta? Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things that I'm struggling with is the difference between people who are and seeing this, seeing opportunities and wanting to change, wanting to seek a change, and people who are struggling and just trying to survive. So how to bridge, like how to bring people together, or like there's not a lot of time for reflection. So especially with community care, we're thinking now about organizing calls, but I wonder if the people who need these calls maybe most have not enough time to be on another Zoom call while also struggling with care for the children or with financial stress. And so when you're talking about community, I think that's the most important connection for me, at least. That's my biggest worry at the moment.
Yeah, I think that's very real. And I think, Chad, did that get written somewhere under challenges? Oh, here it is. Yes. Balancing community with care, Zoom fatigue.
Oh yeah, there's a piece underneath I'll add to as well in that.
Yeah, I think that's very real. And if anyone on this call has suggestions for that, please do. I know what our team does is for those types of community care or check-ins, making sure that they're opt-in and optional and being clear that it's optional. You don't want to force someone to have to come in and join another coffee hour when they just can't. That's something we do, but I know it doesn't cover everything that you've talked about. Oh, here it is again. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Has anyone else tried addressing that kind of tension and have any thoughts on that?
I can jump in. One thing we've done is just like given people the option always. Like if you're doing a check-in, just say like, okay, we're gonna spend 10 minutes at the top of the call doing this. If you wanna just, that's totally fine.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Hillary. Yeah, and really, yeah, setting those expectations around what's optional, what isn't. Yeah, looking through the other challenges we have here, yeah, people feeling anxious for sure. Remaining connected as you were when it was face-to-face. It's definitely harder now. Yeah, with the people struggling to balance childcare and work, that's rough. And I know our team has thought a bit about this and just making things more flexible. And I know Mozilla has also offered, I think like 2/3 pay if you need to leave and just take care of your kids right now, which is really, really generous. I know not everyone's able to do that, but like offering what you can, people need to step out and being okay with that. Chat, thank you for responding to so many of these in the notes.
There's a lot of just really generous questions and insights here, and a lot of really, really honest struggles. So thank you all for sharing these.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you have any thoughts or comments on these, please feel free to go through and add your own thoughts. I think now's a good time to shift to Chad, who may address some of these as he goes through, yeah, how to practice community care online.
Thanks. And we only call it How to Practice Community Care Online because we anticipate your contribution to the conversation being very, very rich, both in the big room, but also in the breakout rooms on this call. We're going to share like our approach and kind of what we think about when we think about community care. But of course, we're not like the authority or the expert. In fact, we're passing along things that we have learned. And the history of community care, is long, and there's been just so much work done, foundational work done by women of color and others. So this conversation today, of course, is continuation for many folks who've engaged with the work before. Might be a starting point for others of us. It is not at all the be all or end all. As Abby said last call, this is nothing that we have invented, but we did want to share our approach to it and then just encourage everyone here to ask questions and approaches to practicing community care online right now. So we try to start with these key principles in mind. So there's no reason to say belonging 3 times, but belonging, how to make sure people feel welcome, that they are a part of the community, that whatever it is they're bringing, however it is they want to contribute, is recognized, appreciated, held up, held close, just like they are. We think about providing enough structure to provide clear purpose, to maintain that clarity of mission that often brings people together in communities and mission-driven work in organizations, projects, and the like. But also the flexibility to care for one another right now. That might mean alternative timings. It might be new platforms or channels or formats for communication. It might involve, as we'll talk about further down here, focusing on the one thing instead of the many things. It might involve asking ourselves is it the best thing to recreate what we're doing online or to do something completely different? So that mission-driven structure to hold us all together, and that flexibility to make sure that we can stay together during this time. Those are important. And we also think about safety, as we've talked about in running on and how and why we use Zoom, and kind of the security advice that we followed for our calls. You also want to make sure that as part of feeling welcome, people feel safe, right? That is such an important dimension of inclusion and accessibility. And so really do need to pay attention to kind of community needs and making sure that however it is that you come together doesn't cause harm, doesn't put people at risk, and that if there are risks, you are clear about them and you are attempting to mitigate and ameliorate and make them better. We think about rituals as a powerful form of belonging. You'll notice we share our community participation guidelines at the beginning of every call. It's to show that we believe in them. They're in the forefront of our mind. We have everyone's back, and we expect these positive behaviors, and we expect that the behaviors that are not tolerated won't be here. I think it's important to communicate that so that everyone understands them, but people can kind of feel held within them or know that there is redress should there be. We have check-in rituals, like on this call. We love learning about people's different check-in rituals. So if you have some to share, please add them here or in the notes later on. We have done kind of monthly themes. We've had colleagues who put together kind of like emoji parks, and then we can put other emojis in those parks to represent ourselves or animals or little spots we might want to visit. There are a lot of things that folks do here And for those of us just kind of starting with online check-ins and icebreakers, this is a great place to share and something that can be of real practical help in showing care and how you begin your gatherings together. And we also have at the end of these calls, though we sometimes do them at the beginning in other settings, rituals for gratitude and recognition. It's just really important to hold people up right now and to give people the chance to hold up others. I think that's kind of an emotional win-win kind of situation where you have a moment to reflect what you're thankful for, what you're grateful for, someone doing amazing, inspiring work, and just being able to share with others your appreciation for that person can be a powerful thing sometimes for yourself as well as for them, a positive way to show care. Another thing you might consider now to show care is revisiting your norms and developing new norms. You might be in an online space for the first time and be puzzling out the norms about when do we turn our cameras on, when do we turn them off, how do we mute, how do we take turns speaking. Those are discussions that you should be having. They should be clear, they should be as transparent as possible, and they should involve the folks who will be involved in those things rather than being kind of top down. And in those norms, right, there needs to be allowed some flexibility. So often I'll see a piece of advice these days, or Zoom etiquette, as some folks call it, right? It says the norm is kind of like cameras on to attempt to be present in the moment as possible with folks, who can, communicate visually and through clues that way, having mics on for folks who might be doing that auditorially, or whatever media it is, like keeping the thing on that helps others understand you're present with them. But of course, if you need a moment to step back, if you need a moment to yourself, turning whatever that is off, that can be a part of showing care with flexibility. Prioritization right now and deciding together what kinds of things warrant discussion or warrant a meeting online or warrant most of our effort right now can be important in a way to show care. Deciding on that together, right, is important. You want to figure out together, what is that thing we must continue? What is that thing we must carry forward that we together feel is most important? And then you can begin to ask yourself, what can we maybe let go of? And it's not necessarily a letting go of forever. It's not a forgetting. It's not an abandonment. But it might be a pause on everything so that you can do the most important thing together well. And personal ecology and self-care. A good way to model care for others, right, might be to think about the things that help you sustain yourself, to talk about those challenges, but also what it is you do to practice self-care. And then, of course, self-care can exist at the intersection of a lot of privilege. So another part of showing care is championing, protecting, advocating for, ensuring, resourcing as best you can the opportunity to do self-care, to do personal ecology for others in your community or project or organization or workplace. If it's something that you feel you have a handle on and an opportunity to do, you can look for ways that you can make sure that opportunity is extended to others. A kind of practical way of showing community care now is through mutual support and resourcing. So assessing needs, getting out, talking to folks, undoing assumptions, and finding out people's realities and contexts. Thinking about how to meet those needs in ways that respect privacy and security. Again, making sure that the ways that you gather that information and act on it limit harm and risk rather than increase it. You can communicate what you're asking and what you're offering very clearly right now. Transparency can be a powerful form of care during an uncertain time like this, when people know exactly what you're asking them to do for your community or project, right? And they know exactly what they're getting back. They can make an informed decision about their participation and if it's worth it to them to do that right now, given everything else that they also have to deal with. That's a form of care and respect and honesty and transparency that's very important and we don't want to overlook. You can also, as we tried to do last week, communicate any risks involved with the different platforms or approaches that you're using as a way for people to participate, again, in informed ways. So for example, I'm sure there are people who are just not going to be on Zoom, but might be interested in the insights that this wonderful community here has to share. And so we want to make sure that people can access the recordings and the notes later on and things like the Friday email summaries if they're registrants, but they choose not to participate live. So please try to be upfront about any risks that are involved and give people ways to participate if they feel that even the limited risks that you might present them with are too much. And then go through, and it's a good time to kind of recalibrate the allocation or coordination of available resources. Again, as you think about caring for the people in your community or your organization who might need a little more right now, who might need something different, this is something important to do. And you'll make discoveries by talking with people, right, about what they need, and things that people are willing to share right now when asked, and the asking is important. And we also think about showing care and how to disagree. This is a time where the uncertainty, where the frustrations, where the kind of added complications can lead to a lot of bad feels. Folks might go more quickly to personal or defensive places right now. On our team, and I need to find the source for this, I apologize, it is not deconstructive literary criticism. It might be from the Fearless organization, might be the book, or the team that managed itself. But the idea is just called deconstructive criticism. And it tries to get at what's happening when there's a disagreement and how to move forward from it instead of staying in it. So for example, in deconstructive criticism, someone might have an idea, might be very passionate about. They're debating with someone else who has another idea, and you notice, or a third party notices, that their argument is now shifting to a very defensive and personal place. We're not debating ideas anymore. We're debating each other, where someone's withdrawing. It's somehow becoming personal in an escalating way. And so with deconstructive criticism, someone just says, whoa, let's stop for a minute, let's pause. I'm surprised we're so far apart on this, is a good way to begin it. Or I wonder why we're so far apart on this, is a good way to begin it. And then just ask kind of each person in turn, could you explain to me how you got to where you're thinking? And we'll just listen. And could you explain to me how you got to where you're thinking? And we'll just listen. And then the focus becomes, what did we hear that would let us move forward together on part of this, rather than deciding to go with one side or another? And that pause and that being able to explain yourself without judgment and that looking for a solution together can sometimes be helpful in a way to show care when there's a disagreement. The next two are related: providing people with increased response time to overcome fear-driven defensiveness, and sharing key information and gathering people's responses to it ahead of conversations are great ways to show care. Things that we might not think of as surprises could be surprising to people right now. People who normally have amazing kind of meeting faces or poker faces when confronted with something new or surprising or a challenge might not be willing to do that right now. But if we can kind of share with each other ahead of time, here are the things we might discuss, here are the things I'm a little concerned about, what are your concerns? We can enter into those conversations knowing, that we're caring for each other and we're caring for each other's questions and concerns about what we're going to discuss. We're not here to like surprise anyone or get a hot take from folks who just can't give you a hot take right now. We think about attending to our listening posts, and by that I just mean the different channels and platforms you use for community communication. Think about careful and caring moderation and helping people think about maybe new channels that are needed right now, so that if they want to talk about COVID-19, for example, or if they want to talk about, let's say, just some context, some dimension of their own life in this time, it can be in like a safer space, maybe there can be a new channel for that. This old channel, maybe it just continues to be about the work itself, but it gives you an opportunity to practice content sensitivity about what kind of content shows up in which channels. And that gives people a sense of agency and choice over where they participate. Or maybe there's a day where I can handle this type of news and conversation. Maybe there's a day when I just need to mute that channel. So some separation of those things right now, according to what people are asking for, can be a very helpful form of care and keeping people engaged in your communications platforms in ways that might maybe fulfill them and keep them going instead of exhausting them. The trick is, of course, to really pay attention to what's happening at those listening posts and to not duplicate or overwhelm people with multiple channels doing the same thing. So, for example, community members have already made a new channel for something. There's probably not a reason for us as leaders to go make that new channel again and insist everyone move there. This is a great time to reframe professional development and training as a form of care. It's a great time to ask again, what do you feel you need right now to do the key work that we're pulling forward together? It's a good time to talk about training for online interactions, but also the risks involved as well as the tools, and understanding those and helping ourselves protect one another against them. It might be time to provide training on life and work balance demands for everyone, including leaders. This is different. It can be acknowledged as such, and we can seek, more learning about it, right? And it might be a good time where maybe if people have been working individually or independently and kind of coming together to report out on their own tasks, maybe it's time to collaborate. Maybe there's a way people can pick up slack for each other now that perhaps wasn't as needed before. Or maybe this is a great time to think about mentorship within your community or project or organization if you haven't yet. But the kind of mentorship where someone listens and helps people achieve their goals, not the kind of mentorship that tells people what they should be doing. We use a little bit of opt-in social time for belonging on our team. I've seen that work successfully. It's scheduled with care and consideration, so it usually doesn't conflict with other meetings people have, but it's also totally opt-in. So it's normal to see someone there one week, but not another, things like that. It's mostly for check-ins. If anybody does need to connect with someone or if there's some work thing to discuss, it is very stringently limited to, hey, could I send you a Slack later about this thing so we could talk? Yeah, and then, back to the social time. We've seen lightweight prompts work pretty well. I've been on calls recently with pets, calls with puppets, calls with costumes, been on calls where people for whom this isn't a risk will kind of give people a tour of their neighborhood or a place they grew up or a favorite place with Google Maps, just ways to share using online affordances that help people relate to one another. This next one is something I try to do a lot. I think in this new space, in any new space, even in the old spaces, we should expect to make mistakes. And I advocate actually rehearsing, taking responsibility for mistakes, rehearsing, asking community members, how would you like to go forward from this mistake I made? What can I do with you? What can I do for you? What can I do to make this right for you? And then after rehearsing some of those things, getting feedback from a trusted colleague, a mentor, or if there's just a ton of trust, whatever your team, your community might be. Hey, I anticipate like just saying the wrong thing at some point, or I always use humor. I know I'm gonna make a joke that makes light of a situation I shouldn't be making light of right now. I worry about that, and I want you to know I worry about that. And if it happens, my plan is to apologize immediately, not brush it under the rug, and ask you what I can do to make amends, for example. That can be really powerful. And of course, sustainability. So a really important thing right now is how to keep people involved. How can I keep showing them care? How can I sustain the value exchange that is making this work, worthwhile for them, that is making it possible for them to do this work? So leveraging creativity right now and really asking questions like, are we trying to recreate what we used to do offline? Are we trying to recreate what we did before this time? Or do we need to make new things? Do we keep doing the 5 things? Do we do the one thing? How could we reinvent the one thing? Ask people, invite them into a creative, generative conversation. See what happens. You might decide after going through several ideas, we should keep doing what we're doing. That's fantastic. But you might find something else that can carry things forward even better and towards our future. It's a good time to reassess roles, responsibilities, contribution pathways. Folks may, ask you or need to be asked if they need maybe fewer responsibilities or a different role or a different way of contributing. Some other folks might be able to do a little bit more of this, a little bit less of that right now. It's a good time to ask and to show care and not just to assume everyone's kind of fine doing the things they have always done. I'll underline this again, really identifying what matters most to continue online, I think is a way to show like care for the mission, care for the people, care about minimizing the effect of what you're doing together on people's kind of exhaustion and maximizing its capacity to provide them with fulfillment, restoration, and joy in a difficult time. It's also a good time to scan for emergent funding opportunities. So there might be a moment where one of these organizations or a different organization has just offer for you and a project your community or workplace is working on, or perhaps is working on in collaboration with others. This might be a way to get some financial resourcing that can help sustain the work during this time. And if you have ideas about other funders, other opportunities, other forms of mutual aid, please do add them right here. We did start 2 minutes late today, which means I'm 2 minutes over, which is still better than the 3 minutes over I was at yesterday. But let's do a few minutes of Q&A before we go on to our breakout rooms.
Yes, feel free to write them in the doc in section 6 here, or unmute yourself and just ask. And thanks for people adding more funding resources. That's great.
Awesome. Any want to share out loud? Now's a great time.
I think a question that came up before was rehearsing making mistakes, or rehearsing your response to making mistakes. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I'll share the story that I shared on the last call. So the example for this, for me, this is something, I experience when other people do it. This is something I experienced. I used to do this quite often. But as one of those people, we're in a group of working with mostly women or in a mixed group, I've used the phrase, you guys, and that was something or guys, let's do this. That was something I really wanted to stop. So I just made a little script for myself. When I would say that, I would, kind of habituate myself to something like, wait, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say I meant that. Everyone, are we ready to move on? Or folks are ready to move on? Or, a much more inclusive phrase. And what that did was it let me kind of bookmark those instances and kind of count the frequency and see if I was doing okay at ending one habit, beginning a new habit. It let me rehearse and practice the language that I wanted to use each time I made that mistake. And eventually, I think in the long term, it helped very much. That's a very important, but a relatively lower stake mistake. There may be other mistakes that have much more severe consequences, but I still think it behooves us to think about, when I have one of those moments, how do I help the community move ahead from it, rather than asking them to pretend it didn't happen.
Cool. Thanks, Chad. Any other questions?
All right.
And I think it's time to move on to the next one. And yeah, I see some people are double booked. I understand Zoom overload. It's a thing. But we do want to give you a chance to sort of talk to each other about what's going on in your communities and really help and support each other. So the next section is breakout rooms. So just a quick reminder, asks for these rooms, please listen to each other. This is a great way to practice a bit of that deep listening piece, but at least the active listening piece. So as you're listening to each other, please don't start rehearsing in your mind what you're going to say. I know I do that a lot. Avoid judgment and solutioneering. Don't just try to tell everyone how to fix their problems. Common denominator of kindness, be kind to each other. Only share what you feel comfortable sharing. Don't feel pressured into sharing more than you want. Use the ask for help button if you need assistance. Chad or I will jump into your room if you do that. So with that, I think Chad is creating the rooms. We'll get you into the groups of 3 or 4. So say hello and introduce yourself to any new friends. Who are you? Where are you from? What brings you here? Then the 3 prompts for discussion are, how does your organization show care really clearly or strongly? What kinds of care do you think your work or org should offer more of right now and in the future? And then finally, what is a new learning you have about community care from this call that you will take away with you? So those are the 3 prompts. We'll give you 10 minutes, Chad. Does that sound about right?
I think we could do the 12 for sure.
12 minutes? Okay,
Yeah,
we'll give you 12 minutes. So you'll have an 11-minute countdown and then 1 minute at the end before you get pulled back in.
All right, here come the rooms. I will pause the recording. Hello and welcome back from Breakout Rooms. We are going to go ahead at the bottom-ish of page 8 where it says Shared Insights. And now's the time where we'll bring things back from that conversation and kind of surface them and lift them up for the group. So there are some questions there you could respond to, but really would love to know, what is one thing that stuck with you from the conversation? And what is one thing you'd like to +1 that somebody else shares that seems powerful to you? So we'll do this and then we'll move on to closing circle, but please go ahead and share one thing from your conversation that you want to take with you, and +1 something somebody else contributes as well. Yeah, and you can do that under a question you want to answer or just under the general notes thing, whichever you'd like. And if you'd rather do this out loud or in another way, we can take notes for you. Hmm. Dave could use an assist in the chat for anyone else using Zoom on Linux, if you have experience with that. We've got some great insights here shared throughout both the Breakout Room section and shared insights, making sure that we provide that space and flexibility for folks, and not to necessarily expect them to be as active as they were before, or perhaps active in the same way as they were before. Recording and sending notes can be very important. Yeah, documentation, as we do that flexibility, making sure people can kind of stay up to date, catch up, advance the work in their own ways, on their schedule, can be important. Technology framing, containers, yeah, structures. These are great. Please do, there's some typing left. Please do add an idea and +1 something else that seems to resonate with you from another contributor here. Is there anything anyone would like to share out loud or otherwise bookmark here for further discussion before we go on to closing circle?
Yeah, me, because I was the one who put in the doc that basically I think for like smaller groups, and I know how many of us are there in the call, but I don't think there's that many of us. I think sometimes, well, it's good to focus on the verbal part, and sometimes having a document, especially when people don't have two screens, it's a bit distracting from the human part. So I think it's very much about the focus. If you wanted to create some, sorry, it's my kid. Yeah, well, this is why it's sometimes better to be muted as well. So yeah, so this. Yeah, so basically sometimes it's easier just to have a document because everyone can be muted and there are no kids shouting in the background. But on the other hand, sometimes it's better if you're looking for to have some kind of interaction or whatever. I mean, this is a conversation we had, so I thought I would just voice it if I given that I wrote it, right?
Oh, that's great. Thank you. Yeah, that's something definitely to keep puzzling over, and is very dependent on the nature of the call, the purpose of the call, size of the group. That's great to bring up and something to think about. And this got me thinking about personal ecology things we might try next week in that conversation as well. So thank you. Looking that we have 5 minutes left and have gotten to this point where in the schedule where it makes sense to go to the closing circle, I'll hand it over to Abby to do just that.
Thanks, Chad. Right as we were getting robot-y, perfect timing. Huge thanks to everyone for the insights you have here in the discussion. I think that's something that hasn't come up before, actually, using the text documentation versus like fully engaged. So I think that's a really good conversation. But in closing circle, first couple of reminders. Please continue these practices. And there was a quote, I forget who said it. It's in the notes later, but in the morning call, someone's like, when a fisherman has downtime, they spend time fixing their fishing nets. So now that we're not doing everything we were before, like spending time focusing on that community and really caring for that community will reap benefits after this call or after this whole crisis is over, like spending that time. And please do continue this going forward. It's a nice way to sort of start putting in these habits and practices in a way that will benefit your community long term. So please do that. Please fill out our survey. This really helps us change things for the call. We do take the input you have here and change things even for tomorrow's call. And we do change things week to week, and it's helped us really fix how we frame the call and also schedule a few things. So your input is very helpful. Like Chad was mentioning, the ritual of gratitude. This shout out and thanks section is a great way for you to say thanks to maybe your breakout room partners or maybe someone from your community who's really stepped up and helped you during this time. So please add some thanks there. And request for peer assists. If you have something, a share that you want this group to hear about, please put it here and also in the MozFest Slack where we can show it to. We have over 2,000 people on that Slack right now, which we're celebrating this week. So you can share it there and here. So if you want someone to maybe review a doc that you have or something that you're implementing around community care, please do that. Or if you have an event or something you want to promote, it's a good place for it. We have a bunch of resources here because, again, we didn't invent community care. A lot of people have been thinking about this for a long time. So great things both on safety and privacy, but also community care and some resources around funding at this time. I'm going to highlight this first one, Listening to the Edges. So Matt Thompson, he used to work with us. He interviewed Akaya Windwood, and Chad and I did Rockwood training with her a couple of years ago. It's his leadership training, and it really shaped a lot of how we think about community care and how we work with communities. So I'd recommend that. That really has influenced us. And please add your own resources. I know we don't know everything about community care, so please submit your own here. And thanks for everyone who linked things above. I think we'll try to bring those down below too. We have 5 ways to stay involved. We mentioned the Slack already, so you can join there and see what resources other people are sharing. And then final reminder of that feedback form. It really does help us. We're ending 2 minutes early, so you can spend those 2 minutes filling out the survey. That would be super helpful, so please do. Next week, we're talking about personal ecology, so more of that self-care to balance out this community care. And then the final week, we'll be doing community management, so more of the operationalizing stuff around managing the community online. Chad, anything to add?
Just reviewing some notes earlier, and especially the check-ins today. All of your many feelings are heard and recognized, and hope you find joy and restoration and fulfillment where you can going forward. And if there's something we can do to help another conversation, unpack some of the stuff, whether it's on Slack or a quick chat, just let us know.
Yeah, we have been meeting with a couple of people individually, so if you want to talk about something specific, please reach out to us. We're happy to jump on the call with you. With that, I think I'll stop the recording. All right, bye everyone.
Thank you all so much. Bye-bye.